Um, with that statement, it really kind of stuck with me. And I didn't necessarily know why. I know that there was, options to study supply chain. I did not take a supply chain class. I wish I did. But when I graduated, I had traditional career paths. I'd interviewed for Wells Fargo. I interviewed with Morgan Stanley. I'd worked in retail in college, and there was that path to work the corporate ladder in retail. A friend of mine did get a job in supply chain at Target. So there was those traditional career paths. I didn't have any interviews or options on a large corporate supply chain role, but the lowest job offer I had in terms of on paper attractiveness, there was the lowest salary of everything, was a job at a local freight brokerage. And that statement my professor had made jumped out at me. And it was a local franchise. It was this small business. The owner was young. It was an entrepreneurial environment. And I really sunk my teeth into that. And when I say that, what I mean is not only was I performing and rising in the company and doing well, but I was soaking everything in. I think that is such an important piece of, regardless of what your walk of life is, whatever you're doing, whatever your job is, even on the academic side as a student, you have a certain metric that you want to hit: sales goal, grades, operational KPIs. Has someone raised their hands?
I didn't want to interrupt you, but when you're ready to take a break, I have a new question.
Oh, cool. Okay, I'll finish this thought here. So I think such an important thing to keep in mind is you have your immediate goal, but when you're trying to achieve that goal, there's so much happening simultaneously that you can soak in and learn. And I think that's just such a common denominator of anyone who's successful at anything, is always soaking in everything around you. That can pay dividends in so many ways that you have no idea in the moment. But as a freight broker, I'm working with so many different types of companies. And to my professor's credit, I'm seeing how all of those companies function. I'm working with them as their shipping partner. I'm seeing their growth. I'm seeing how they go about doing things. I'm learning more about every different business across different categories. And that played a really, really big role in me building my just fundamental knowledge of how gears are turning at companies for me to be able to start and do what we've done here at Trophy Smack. I'll pause there.
And I think it's worth talking a little bit about small company versus big company. And so I counsel a lot of students who are thinking about a targeted degree, and I encourage them to think also about industry and company size, because you can, if you work at an entrepreneurial startup, learn so much because there's never enough people. There's always too many things to do, and you can jump in and get all this great experience, but you may not have great career guidance. Whereas if you work at a large firm, they probably have onboarding programs and training and development, and it's all kind of planned out. So there's pros and cons of both. And I don't know if Matt has any opinions on that.
Yeah, I think that everybody is wired in their own way that can thrive in one or the other or both. I think just the way that I'm wired, I thrive more in that entrepreneurial environment, which is why I took the lowest paying job offer that I had. But that's not for everybody. And I think working at a larger company with a lot more structure, that can align with the way an individual operates most effectively. And I think when you are in that bigger, more structured career path, it doesn't mean that you can't be innovative. It doesn't mean that you can't be an entrepreneur, because there's a lot of fulfillment and value that comes from making a change and having an impact. And this transcends money and pay, which of course that is a critical variable here, but if you focus on that and making an impact and making a change and adding value, the other side typically follows.
So why don't you tell us about a few of the businesses you've started? Because it's more than just one, right?
Yes. And this is I think it ties back to, are you born with it or do you learn? My mom's an elementary school teacher. My dad is an aeronautical engineer. I wasn't in this environment of, my parents are entrepreneurs and there's, startups happening left and right. I just, for unexplainable reasons, have always wanted to start some type of a business. So, when I'm 4 years old, I'm trying to sell my parents things that I'm making. Or I came up with a game, and if you make it, you get a payout, and if you don't, then you have to pay a fee. Like, I didn't read about that as a 4-year-old. I was just like, hey, coming up with games of chance. I just started doing that. So that's definitely, not something I was particularly taught or encouraged. I was just doing that. But then as I got older, 7 years old, I'm selling origami at, the playground. I'm going door to door and I'm selling crafts to all the neighbors. That's something that my parents didn't say, hey, here's an opportunity for you. If you take all of these little components and you make them, you can sell them. No one said that to me. So this is certainly in the camp of that was just there. And then that is kind of a baseline. Every hobby I've had as I'm going through high school and college, I've tried to monetize in one way or another. And I think when I look back at that, and I'll touch on some of the businesses that are more notable during that process. But when I look back at it, I've always had ideas that I was not in a position to execute because of the nature of the idea, the broadness. I didn't have the skill set. Those ideas were all valid, but it really emphasizes the learning throughout everything that you do, because you don't know in 10 years if you have an opportunity or an idea and the stars align. But if you're missing knowledge, skills to execute on it, you can't just all of a sudden be there, right? Early in college, I'm thinking, okay, poker is becoming popular, an online poker room, like this isn't really a thing yet. I know as a 17, 18-year-old, I could not. And you read about some of these younger just phenomenons that drop out of college and start these multi-billion-dollar companies. We don't know what they did before then. You only hear about the big home runs. So I think for a while, I kind of had this mindset of, that's not possible for me. That's a lottery ticket for someone else. But that's a fallacy in thought. We don't know everything that they've tried and learned and what work they put in when I was 13 and not thinking about those sorts of things the way they were. But after college, maybe a year or two into my career, I thought of the idea that, hey, my girlfriend at the time is at home. She's not feeling well. I need to go get her soup. And there's a big line. Man, this is so silly. Why can't I put that order in on my phone? And so now this is obviously Postmates, Uber Eats, and all this. And I wrote a business plan for that. And I'm thinking, okay, how do I get this started? I got to start at this local level. I've got to, sell businesses locally for buy-in and proof of concept and then scale. I was not in a position to execute that idea, but that idea was clearly valid. So businesses that I did start that I had this skill set to execute on. In college, I started a Red Bull vending route. And this is right when Red Bull came out. So guys, you think about Monster Energy and these big 16 ounce, 20 ounce, those didn't exist. The first energy drink was Red Bull, and it was an 8.3 ounce can. And that was it. And every single vending machine was 12 ounce or the half a liter bottle. There wasn't a vending machine for Red Bulls. I'm in college. Everyone's drinking Red Bulls. So I had the resources and means to start that at Fresno State. And it was really successful in its little scope that it was. And interestingly enough, as I'm being resourceful and I'm buying so this is a whole long story on its own, but there's a company that was selling the rights to this Red Bull vending route, and it was an asinine price. It was actually kind of illegal the way that they were selling rights. So instead of spending $5,000 per machine and buying the rights to a region, I was buying them used for everyone that got suckered and didn't know what to do with all these machines. So as I'm buying them used, I'm paying freight to bring them in. So connect those dots. When I interviewed at this freight brokerage, I brought all my freight invoices. I paid $500 to bring this machine in. What's my quote? This zip code, and this weight. And the cost was 160. And I'm like, oh. So in my first 6 months as a freight broker, I became top 3 out of 1,000 because I called every single vending machine company in the country, because I realized that like there's this opportunity there. So not on the main narrative of what I was going for, but I think that ties in this always being opportunistic and thinking about opportunities and learning.
So let's talk a little about, oh, go ahead.
No. I was just going to keep rambling on about other businesses.
Well, so is there another business of significance you'd like to share before we talk about Trophy Smack?
Yeah, and I'll keep them brief. I won't go into the weeds, but I think an important takeaway from being an entrepreneur is also understanding that traditional path of a career. Nothing's guaranteed in life, but it's more stable. Starting a business, there is no such thing as a 1,000 batting average. So I started a company with my wife right after college. It was a cooking school for kids, and it was fun, and we were successful in what we were doing. But my goodness, I'm never doing retail again, because you pour so much into it, and to scale brick and mortar is a really tall order. So we ran that for a couple of years, and it was successful. But there was a point where I'm a freight broker. I'm taking calls from truck drivers, and I've got 3 phone lines. I've got a vending route still. So I've got calls from apartments that someone put gum in the coin op. And then I've got an employee. My wife calls me. An employee calls in sick. I need to put a chef's suit on and help with a pizza party for 5-year-olds. Like, my head's going to explode. We sold the cooking school. So it was successful in its own right. We made money and we sold it, but it was not for me. And I learned that. I did have another startup that was very big, aspirational. We were converting waste plastic into synthetic crude oil. I know nothing about any of that, but we tried. We produced millions of liters of synthetic oil. It was in Thailand. It was a great experience, but when you swing for the fences, you're going to miss, and we missed. We lost a lot, but we managed our funding, and I personally allocated the right amount of risk, so it was mitigated. My personal ship didn't sink because of it. It stung, but learned a lot through those failures.
So then on to Trophy Smack and Mark Cuban.
Yes.
How did you get it? How did you get on Shark Tank? And what made you start Trophy Smack, and what got you to the next level? Yes.
So everything that I've said, kind of building up of having the right skill set, and you don't necessarily have to have the resources. And when I was in college, I remember hearing professors say that, and I'm just like, yeah. But if I don't have money, how can I do anything? But with the resources that you have, what are those immediate steps to start getting towards accomplishing anything, whether it's a business idea, whether it's something that you're doing within school or career path? What do you have today, and what is going to get you closer within what you have available? So with Trophy Smack, I don't know anything about the trophy and awards category, the industry. I don't know how they're made. I don't know anything. And there's two parts. One, I've always been a competitive person in general, and I'm winning sales competitions. The company that I'm with at the time, they actually acquired a startup I didn't get to talk about, but they stopped giving me awards. And I've got #1 sales 2010, 2011, 2012, and I was still the top salesperson, but I didn't get an award. And I'm thinking, why? What's happening? So I reached out to the person that usually does it, and she said, oh, we didn't have time to go to the local trophy shop. We've just been so busy. I'm like, what? I just made millions of dollars for you guys, and you didn't have time? It looks like I stopped doing good, even though I didn't. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So that was one thing in the back of my head. And then I played fantasy football for the first time 5 years ago with my now co-founder of Trophy Smack. And me being the competitive person I am, I'm letting everyone know that, I'm dominating them throughout the season. And I made it to the finals. And our league, if anyone plays fantasy football, you know what I'm talking about. Our league didn't have a trophy. So I went to buy one, and I was wallet out, my credit card is out. I'm willing to buy something just obnoxiously huge, and it didn't exist. And I'm thinking, I'm new. This is the first year playing for me, but there's 30 million Americans that play this game. How could this be? So between those two things, it kind of converged on, okay, I have a lot going on. There's multiple businesses at that time. I was working on some successful, some startup. Thailand business had just finished failing. So starting a new business, it wasn't something I was like, okay, what's an idea for a new business? But it just kind of converged like, wait a second, you've got this underserved fantasy sports market. And the reason it's underserved is the trophy and awards space as a whole has not caught up to the way things are done today. This is a business model from 30 years ago with manufacturer, distributor, retail, and it's very protected distribution lines. And the manufacturer imports everything from China anyway. So you really have 4 layers. If Zappos can disrupt shoes and turn that into $1 billion company, something that before Zappos, of course you have to try on shoes. How could you buy a pair of shoes without trying it on? How does that not happen in trophies yet? So I had things that were taking place that I was successful and were going well. If I'm going to pull time away from that to start a business, it has to check some boxes. And this check boxes of this is a very, very big opportunity. So I jumped in heads first. I started taking apart old trophies. I started realizing how inefficient things are truly done from how trophies are made and why they haven't changed in 30 years. So there was that just learning and absorbing, and I joined the associations and I'm going to the shows. So, the idea, check boxes that it was valid. And then I'm jumping in and I'm learning and I'm rubbing shoulders with people in the industry. And back to an earlier point, ideas that I've had over the years that I wasn't at the right place. I didn't have the means. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have resources. With trophies, if I had this idea for Trophy Smack 10 years ago, before I had all this experience in learning and supply chain, I wouldn't have had a shot. There would have been no chance. So me sourcing everything ourselves, I never sourced for myself from a factory in Asia. I've never done that, but I'm working indirectly with companies that do. So I had just enough to really jump in and start learning myself and making all those moves.
And so you disrupted the trophy business by completely re-engineering the supply chain.
That's right. So we took a very strong design and modern aesthetic to our trophies. Like when I'm trying to build a prototype and I'm looking at the existing supply chain, I couldn't get columns. Like you think of a 3-column trophy, and I apologize for the back of my Zoom call here. I typically have lots of trophies. but we are out of stock on everything because they're all sitting in the port. So everything's been kind of taken and rummaged through, and parts have been taken. So I don't have anything here.
That leads to a good question, and we're down to 4 minutes that Amy was asking about. Given the complete disruption of our supply chains over the past year and a half, do you have any suggestions for students who might be focusing on that in supply chain related careers?
This is the best time, better than ever, to be in this industry, because never in the history of our modern country has supply chain been on everyone's mind. It is a supply chain is about to crumble the global economy because things keep getting worse. And this is we can talk for 8 hours about this, but companies are now creating chief supply chain officer. The amount of focus that's going to be put on hiring these types of positions to, hey, things have always been done the way they're done, but now that we know that this is happening and it could happen, it's risking, this is an existential crisis for so many people. And we need smart people that know this side of the business, that can help pivot, that can send things to other ports, that can maneuver differently, because a lot of companies don't have that now, that things have just kind of cranked along. They always cranked along.
And I think if you want to be entrepreneurial, you as a student with supply chain expert experience and degree could go and do entrepreneurship within a company, because I honestly think what it's going to take is for companies to completely rethink how they do things and where they get their parts and what steps are in that chain. We need to eliminate steps, perhaps. So that entrepreneurial mindset would totally benefit people entering supply chain right now, is in my opinion. And I'll just share with this small group that our research indicates that in the LA Orange County area, there's going to be an annual shortage of about 6,000 jobs that can be fulfilled with someone with just a 2-year degree. And these are above average wage, high earning jobs. So, and you don't even need a 4-year degree to get them. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I just realized there's a lot of questions. Do we end at the 30-minute mark, or is there a Q&A after that?
Let's start with the Q&A. So there's a question about being starting a freight brokerage, and how do you manage a freight brokerage when you're also going to school for full time?
Hustle hard. Always improve, always learn. That feeling of, oh, I'm tired. Of course you need some downtime, but the way I look at entrepreneurship in general, and when I was starting as a freight broker, I look at it like an airplane. You've got this ramp up period. This is a sprint. This is not the time to take breaks. Once you get up, you can't burn yourself out. But when you're starting, it's go time. Hustle.
Another question was about your deal with Mark Cuban. Would the business have done well without that deal? What has the deal changed for the business and for you?
Yeah, so I didn't get to talk about that. I'm sure that was probably like when someone's looking at which break room to go into, like, oh, Mark Cuban. So Shark Tank, lifetime entrepreneur. This is a dream come true, bucket list thing for me. Every business I've ever had, I've thought about role playing, walking down the halls and pitching that. Shoot, are we still going? I just got to leave Baker. It's going to close in a minute. So Mark Cuban, we would be successful without being on Shark Tank. There was debate whether we needed to give up, because we gave up more equity than we otherwise needed to. We didn't do it because we needed to raise the money, but the Shark Tank effect is real. And there's the contributions that Mark Cuban has made, which is fantastic. He's exceeded our expectations. It's an incredible experience. But the halo effect, me as a salesperson my whole life, I'm used to following up hundreds of times and doing whatever it takes. Now I'm going to knock on a door and it opens, like, oh, hey, you're on Shark Tank. Like, incredible experience. But that's not a crux of our success. It just accelerated our success.
Matt, we can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom, your expertise, your experience. We really appreciate you. You're welcome to hang out. We're going to head back to the main room.